I guess I kind of need the headphones. Hi guys, welcome for joining. Thank you for coming to the stream. Gonna finish this book. Nancy drew The Haunted Bridge. It's taken me quite a while to get through this one. I'm not really sure why. We are reading the original version, which is, what, 220 pages? So yeah. Thank you guys for the hosts, Riddy and V. I appreciate it. Sorry for the impromptu-ness of the stream. I just haven't come up with a schedule, but this might be my only stream for the week. I'm trying to figure that out because I want to give myself time to do a bunch of stuff before school starts, which is only it's August 6th. School starts on the 19th. Although I'll probably start looking at things on the class when it opens. Hopefully at midnight on the 18th, I'll probably start looking at things and filling out my calendar and that kind of stuff for my online class. I have one online class and one class in person, so it won't be until 21st that I have my in-person class, but at least I can get started on my online class, which I already have the book for. The other one didn't give me any books, so I don't know if he's gonna give us the syllabus and we're gonna get the books that way, or he's gonna give us handouts or what have you. I have no idea. But yeah. Hopefully the music is alright. You can always let me know if it's too loud or if it should be higher. I'm gonna go ahead and get started because this stream can't be more than an hour and a half from this point. So, but I think that will give us plenty of time to finish. I think we only have like 5 more chapters. Or 4, I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe 4. I need to write this down. So we are on chapter 21. And where did we leave off? Nancy went to a dance with Ned and everybody else, I think. Ned was jealous of somebody, I don't even know. I'm not even sure. Talking about Margaret Judson. Oh, they're about to go to the dance, I think, is what's happening. I'm not entirely sure. But anyways, let's get started. Chapter 21 is called The Note in the Fountain. You seem very positive that you'll locate Margaret Judson, Ned commented with a teasing smile. Thought you didn't believe in hunches, Nancy. Well, in a way I don't, the girl confessed. But somehow this feeling I have is so strong I can't ignore it. Something tells me I'll meet the woman before the evening is over. I certainly hope your hunch is right, because you've been worrying about her ever since you came to the Deer Mountain Hotel. I'm afraid I've been ruining everyone else's pleasure with my own selfish problems. Your problems are not selfish ones, Ned replied quickly. I know how important it is that Miss Judson be located. Are you willing to help me? Nancy asked eagerly. Of course. I thought you didn't need my assistance. Oh, Ned, it was just that I couldn't explain everything, and I'm afraid I can't even now. That doesn't matter, Nancy. You tell me what to do, and I'll obey orders with no questions asked. It may mean ruining your evening, Ned, Are you willing to substitute sleuthing for dancing? We can dance when we get back to River Heights. That's the way I feel about it, Nancy agreed in satisfaction. It may be that I am too hopeful, but I honestly believe matters will come to a climax tonight. Meanwhile, at the Deer Mountain Hotel, George and Bess were wondering what had become of their chum. They had not seen her since the start of the golf match and could not imagine where she might be. I didn't mean to worry you, Nancy apologized, on arriving as she greeted her chums. I merely jumped from one thing to another so fast that it didn't occur to me to leave word where I was going to be. Classic Nancy. Bess and George were enthusiastic regarding plans for the dance, and promptly forgave Nancy the anxiety she had caused them. Then they hastened to their room to change into evening frocks. Ned, Bill, and Bud stayed in the lobby as Nancy went to the desk to inquire for mail. The clerk handed her 2 envelopes, one of them plain, the other bearing the stamp of the hotel. Nancy decided instantly that the latter was from Mortimer Bardescu, for the handwriting was similar to one of the specimens of his which she had collected. She opened it and read, I won my golf match today and hope that rain did not cause you to lose yours. Important business calls me away from the hotel for a few days, but I hope to see you again before you return to your home. Important business, Nancy mused as she tucked the letter into her pocket. I wonder if it concerns Miss Judson. She opened the second letter and was astonished to learn that it was from the very person whose name had been in her thoughts. A brief message read, The bearer who takes this note to your hotel has said that you wish to see me. Please write your message and leave it tonight before 9 o'clock in the hand of the fountain statue, Margaret Judson. Nancy read the note a second time to be certain that she gathered its amazing contents, then turned to the desk clerk. Can you tell me who brought this letter to the hotel? She queried. I was not on duty at the time, Miss Drew. Nancy wondered if the messenger could have been Bardescu. There seemed no way to find this out until the day clerk should resume his duties at the hotel. She quickly sought Ned and showed him the note. I can't understand how Miss Judson learned that I wished to see her, unless it was through Mortimer Bardescu. Well, at least it looks as if your sense of intuition is correct, Nancy. You may meet Margaret Judson before the evening is over. I told you I would, the girl laughed gaily. Ned, let's walk into the garden. I want to look around. I'm not certain which statue Miss Judson means. I'd say it was the large one at the rear of the hotel. Isn't that the only statue connected with a fountain? Nancy could recall no other, but she wanted to make certain. Without appearing to be particularly interested in the surroundings, the couple walked slowly about the hotel grounds. Finally, they halted by the fountain, pretending to watch the goldfish in the basin around it. You're apt to get wet if you try to place a note in the hand of this statue, Ned chuckled softly. Will you carry out the orders, Nancy? I intend to leave a blank sheet of paper here, Ned. I would write a note, but I'm not certain Miss Judson sent me that letter. Do you think it's a forgery? It could be. I'd like to compare Miss Judson's signature with the one which appears on Mr. Haley's photograph, but I won't have time now to go back to the cabin. Ned looked at his watch. No, I guess you won't, for it's very nearly 9 o'clock. We must work quickly. First, I'll get a blank sheet of paper. Wait here, Ned. Nancy ran back into the hotel, soon reappearing with a folded envelope in her hand. Seating themselves on a nearby bench, the couple waited until the grounds were deserted. Ned then leaned across the stone basin of the fountain and placed the sheet of paper in the hand of the marble figure. Now we'll act as if we're returning to the hotel, Nancy whispered. We'll steal back here and keep watch to see if anyone comes for the message. They retraced their steps to the hotel, walked directly through the lobby, and left by a side entrance. Selecting a bench which was screened from the fountain by high bushes, they stationed themselves to wait. 9 o'clock came, and from within the hotel, Nancy and Ned heard the first strains of the orchestra as it tuned up for the dance. I'll gladly wait here alone, Nancy offered as she saw her companion glance wistfully toward the lighted ballroom. Won't you go inside and dance? No, I'd rather stay here with you, he insisted. 9:30 arrived, but still no one had come to retrieve the message. Shortly before 10 o'clock, a couple strolled near the fountain, but after lingering there for a few minutes, walked on again. "Oh, it's useless to wait," Nancy declared at last. "We've wasted an hour already." "I'm willing to stay here if you want me to," Ned offered generously. "No, I'm beginning to think that the note will never be claimed. Ned, will you do me another favor?" "You know I will, Nancy." "This may sound like a silly request, but I'd like to have you drive me over to Hemlock Hall in your car." "I'll be glad to do it. It's such a warm night that a ride will be more fun than dancing." Nancy was convinced by this time that she could not hope to meet Margaret Judson at the Deer Mountain Hotel. She suspected that the note requesting her to leave a message in the hand of the statue had been written by Mortimer Bardescu, who doubtless hoped to obtain information in that matter. Skip ahead in that music because of the singing. "Haven't you searched for Miss Judson in the Hemlock Hall vicinity before?" Ned questioned curiously as he and Nancy drove away. "Yes, several times, but tonight I have a new idea. It occurred to me that she may have rented a home near the hotel. I want to interview various real estate agents." "Their offices will be closed, Nancy." "I know, but we'll call at their homes." "Oh, Ned, I must find Miss Judson tonight." "We'll not leave a stone unturned," the young man promised. "We'll search until dawn if necessary." Turn down the music a little bit. Feels like it's loud. Nancy and Ned set forth with high hopes to visit every real estate agent in the little city of Mapleton, which was the one nearest to Hemlock Hall. They met nothing but discouragement, and only their grim determination not to give up drove them on. Finally, on interviewing the last real estate man on their list, they met with a favorable response. "Why, yes," the agent reported. "I rented a house only this morning to a strange young woman. I believe her name was Judson, but I can't tell for sure without examining my records." When Nancy had assured him that the matter was of vital importance, the realtor obligingly agreed to accompany the couple to his office. There he found his real estate files, and to the girl's delight confirmed his previous recollection. "Yes, I was correct. The house at 508 Elmwood Street was taken by a woman named Margaret Judson. She asked for a 6-month lease." Nancy thanked the man for his trouble. Writing down the address, she hurried back to the car with Ned. The real estate agent had given them precise directions for reaching Elmwood Street, so they had no difficulty in locating a large white house which bore the number 508. However, Nancy was disappointed to find it in darkness. "Perhaps Miss Judson has gone to bed," Ned suggested, halting the car on the opposite side of the street. "I'm inclined to think she hasn't moved in yet, Ned." "Well, I guess there's nothing more we can do tonight. I'll run across the street and try the bell if you like, but it's a good guess no one is at home." He started to open the car door, but Nancy suddenly placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Wait!" she commanded tensely. A car with brilliant headlights came slowly down the street, and the woman driver appeared to be studying each house in turn. She swung into the gravel driveway at number 508. "That must be Miss Judson now," Nancy said excitedly. "We'll wait here, Ned, until she enters the house, and then we'll knock." They watched a shadowy figure leave the auto and disappear inside the building by a side door. Almost at once, the lower floor was flooded with light. The window shades were lowered. "Shall we go now?" Nancy suggested excitedly. The couple presented themselves at the front door, groping about in the darkness for an electric bell button. Presently they heard footsteps. "Here she comes now," Nancy whispered nervously. "If she should prove to be Miss Judson, we won't tell her the real purpose of our visit." The door opened, and the same young woman whom Nancy had met at Hemlock Hall peered out at the pair. She failed to recognize the girl, and decided that the two were representatives of a real estate firm. She started to explain that she no longer was interested in buying or renting a house, then stopped in confusion as she realized she had mistaken the identity of her callers. "Oh, now I remember you," she said to Nancy, as a beam of light fell directly on the girl's face. "We met at Hemlock Hall. Do come in and please excuse the condition of this house, for I'm just moving in." You are Margaret Judson, if I'm not mistaken, Nancy began cautiously as she and Ned seated themselves. Yes, the young woman smiled. I have rather distressing news to report, Nancy continued. While staying at the Deer Mountain Hotel, I became acquainted with an old man who formerly worked at your estate. Not Joe Haley, the woman asked quickly. He is well? Quite the contrary. Mr. Haley has been injured in an accident, and for days he has remained practically unconscious. He has talked of you constantly and keeps pleading that you come to see him. Oh, I must go to him at once, Miss Judson cried. You must take me to the hospital. Mr. Haley is still at his cabin in the woods, Nancy explained. The doctor did not think it advisable to move him. Then I shall go there, of course. I'll get my hat and purse. In her anxiety, Miss Judson could not find the articles, though they were lying on a table in plain view. Ned placed them in her hands. Suddenly a startled expression came over the young woman's face. No, I can't go after all, she murmured. It will be impossible. Why do you hesitate to visit Mr. Haley? Nancy asked gently. He needs you. I want to go. You don't understand. I'm afraid I might meet a certain person there. Morton Wardell? Nancy drew her question softly. Margaret Judson flung herself on a sofa. Burying her face in her hands, she sobbed wildly. Yes, he's the one. I can never face him as long as I am accused of being a thief. That was the end of chapter 21. The Riddy they had caused them. Yes, hi Terry. Also hi, but also I can't be here super long. No worries. I appreciate you being here for however long you can be. I'm just having some tea. I'm still here unexpectedly. Okay. Good. How does the music sound? Is it? Claps for the chap. Thank you. Welcome for clapping. Is the music too loud? Does it sound okay? What do you think? Is my follower count still accurate? It seems fine by me. Oops, that's not right. Thank you. Okay. We're one away from the giveaway. There we go. Thanks, Betty. Which, I'm going through everything, and I am gonna have dupes, and... Hey, Joni. Good to see you. How are you? So I'm just going through those and trying to figure out what I'm gonna do. Like, what I'm gonna organize for the giveaway. So anyways, chapter 22 is called The Chum's Help. While Nancy and Ned were many miles away, Bess, George, and their escorts were enjoying the dance at the Deer Mountain Hotel. The party soon will be over, Bess declared anxiously as she gazed about the ballroom. What can be keeping Nancy? Ned was eager to attend this dance too, Bill Cowan added. It's queer he disappeared. I imagine they're both out in the garden, George suggested. Let's look there. I've already been outside, Bess replied soberly. I'm beginning to be worried. Before she could say more, a page boy came through the ballroom, calling George Fane's name. The girls summoned him, hoping that Nancy had sent a note to explain her absence. You're wanted at the telephone, Miss Fane, the page told George. I can't imagine who would call me here, the girl murmured in perplexity. I don't believe it's from Nancy. It might be from home. The girl's guess was entirely correct. Mrs. Fane in River Heights, lonesome for the sound of her daughter's voice, had telephoned merely to inquire if she were all right. Oh, yes, Mother, George replied eagerly. We're having a grand time here. I intended to write more often, but you know how it is. Yes, I know, Mrs. Fane laughed. I want you to have a nice vacation so that you come home rested and ready for school." "School," George answered with a grimace, which her mother could not see. "I hate even to think of it. How's Dad?" "Oh, just as well as ever, George. But I have some bad news for you. One of your pet kittens has been sick, and we're afraid it will die." At this point, George lost the thread of conversation completely, for in the adjoining booth, she heard the excited voice of a man saying into the telephone, "So the fellow was a forger! He skipped out! That's a shock, for he had a good reference." "Did you hear what I said?" Mrs. Fane questioned her daughter anxiously. "Your pet kitten." "Oh, yes, that's nice," George replied hastily, her mind upon the conversation in the next booth. "Those two BARs look alike?" she heard the man ask. "And you say the M and the T are similar?" "Yes, I agree that ought to be enough to convict him." George's mind worked with lightning-like speed. Undoubtedly, the letters BAR came from the first part of Mortimer Barteskew's surname, while the M had been taken from his given name. The man was a forger, just as Nancy had suspected. Very likely, the person in the next booth was one of the hotel officials just being told of the discovery. "George," came her mother's voice in exasperation, "what is the matter with you? Can't you hear what I'm saying, or are you really glad your kitten is ill?" "Oh, yes, no," George stammered. "I hear what you're saying, but something important has come up. I can't talk now. I'll call back a little later." She hastily hung up the receiver and darted from the phone booth. Even so, she was too late to learn who had occupied the adjoining one, for it was now empty. "Nancy will want to know this latest information about Barteskew," she told herself excitedly. "I must find her." Since her chum was not available, she sought Bess, making a pretext to draw her into the garden. "I've just had an important discovery," she revealed to her chum. "Mortimer Barteskew is a forger, and apparently the hotel people are looking for him." "No wonder he skipped out," Bess exclaimed indignantly. "That explains the note he left for Nancy. The man probably is miles from here by now." "I'm afraid of it. But he's supposed to play his final golf match tomorrow. Let's walk down to the caddy house and learn if his clubs are gone." "It isn't likely he'd consider returning for a golf match, not when it might mean a prison sentence." "Well, let's find out anyway. It will take only a minute." The girls walked across the grounds toward the caddy house, plainly outlined in the moonlight. The shack had been locked for the night. Disappointed, they turned back to the hotel. Suddenly, Bess noticed a bright object gleaming at her feet in the grass. She stooped and picked it up. "Someone dropped his keys, George." "One of the golfers, I imagine. We can turn the ring in at the office." Bess dropped the keys into her pocket, and they walked on toward the hotel. As they came within view of the garden, George abruptly halted, clutching her cousin's arm. "Bess, look toward that statue by the fountain." "Mortimer Barteskew! What in the world is he trying to do? Steal the goldfish?" The girls crept forward, taking care to keep themselves screened by bushes and trees which were between them and the man. They saw him reach across the basin of the fountain and remove a white object from the hand of the statue. "What did he do that for?" Bess whispered in wonder. "It must have been a note from someone," George replied in an undertone. "Bess, we must capture that man. He's a forger, wanted by the police." "We can't do anything alone." "No, we must steal back to the hotel and get Bill and Bud. There's not a second to lose." Quietly, the girls hurried away. Finding their escorts in the ballroom, they poured forth their exciting story. Bud and Bill, always ready for an adventure, were eager to help. "Perhaps we should notify the hotel people," Bess suggested, but the boys shook their heads. "We can handle that fellow alone," they insisted. "Come on, let's get him." The four let themselves out by a side entrance and quietly approached the fountain. Mortimer Barteskew was standing there, studying a sheet of paper in his hand. They heard him mutter something, whereupon he crumpled the paper and hurled it angrily into the fountain. "Now's our chance," Bud whispered. "We'll sneak up from behind and grab him." The boys moved stealthily forward, but the moonlight was bright, and just at that moment, Mortimer Barteskew turned his head. He gave a cry of alarm and fled toward the caddy house. "Don't let him get away!" Bud cried as the four young people gave chase. Bill, who was a champion sprinter on a college track team, soon overtook the man, throwing him to the ground. Bud and the girls closed in so that Bartesque had no chance to escape. "What is the meaning of this outrage?" the fellow demanded furiously. "Let me up!" "We'll let you up when the police come," Bill retorted grimly. "You low-down forger." "I'd never forged anything in my life," Bartesque denied in a rasping tone. "Let me up or you'll pay for this." Bill and Bud paid not the slightest heed to the man's protestations. However, they discovered that it was not easy to keep Bartesque confined, for he was strong and agile. Bess glanced quickly toward the caddy house. Inspired by a sudden thought, she ran to the locked door to try the various keys which she had found only a few minutes before. To her delight, one of them fit perfectly, and she was able to unlock the door. Bartesque was thrust roughly into the caddy house, and the door securely locked again. Bill and Bud said they would stand guard while the girls ran back to the hotel to notify the officials. "Let me out of here!" Bartesque yelled at the top of his lungs, pounding savagely on the door. "You have no right to do this. What have I done?" "Plenty," Bud told him through the barred window. "Besides being accused of forgery, you're a thief." "You've stolen money from widows and orphans," Bill went on glibly. "You're also wanted for housebreaking. Oh, you'll be lucky if you don't get a life sentence." "There's some terrible mistake," Bartesque moaned. "I've done none of these things. Get me a lawyer." "You'll have one soon enough," Bill told them grimly. "Just wait until the police get here." In the meantime, Bess and George had reached the hotel. Laboring under great excitement, they hurried to the manager's office, bursting in upon the man as he was conferring with another hotel official. "Come quickly," George cried. "We've captured your forger." "What?" the manager demanded incredulously, springing up from his chair. "You've caught the man?" "Yes, we have him, in the caddy house." So great was George's excitement that she began to stammer. "Follow us!" Bess and George were fairly glowing with pride by the time they came to the caddy house. All was quiet within, for Mortimer Bartesque finally had decided that it was useless to try to convince the boys of his innocence. He had collapsed in a corner of the room and was moaning softly. Bess unlocked the door, and the manager cautiously peered inside. "Come out of there, you," he ordered sharply. "Get a move on, or we'll drag you out." Mussed and disheveled, Mortimer Bartesque haughtily emerged from the building. He glared at Bess and George, but before bestowing an accusing glance upon the hotel official. "Sir, I demand an explanation for this outrageous treatment. Never before in all my life have I been so abused and insulted. Rest assured, I shall take this matter to the courts." The manager had spoken no word. He could only stare. "Oh, Mr. Bartesque, 1,000 pardons," the man murmured at last. "This is all a mistake." "A mistake?" George exclaimed indignantly. "Why, this man is a forger. I heard you say so yourself when you were talking in a telephone booth. Or at least I thought it was you." Yes, I recall the conversation, but it is not Mortimer Bartesque who is wanted for forgery." "But the letters, B.A.R. They stand for Barney. One of our newly employed cooks, a man by the name of Jennings, forged a $100 check, putting on it the signature of Barney Martin, who is our caddy master. Mr. Bartesque had nothing whatever to do with the matter." "Oh, then I've made a dreadful mistake," George murmured in confusion. "I shouldn't have acted so impulsively, only I thought Mr. Bartesque was under suspicion even before this. He's written his name so many different ways." "I can explain that," Bartesque said coldly. "Then please do," Bess pleaded. "I'm sure it would clear up a great deal of misunderstanding." "I shall explain nothing to you," the man retorted rudely. "When Miss Drew comes, I will reveal everything to her, in private." Haughtily, the man turned and walked toward the hotel. The manager and his companion hastened after him, continuing to offer apologies for the mistake which had been made. "I seemed to achieve the prized blunder," George murmured contritely. "I acted too quickly." "I'm afraid we all did," Bess agreed soberly. "But the fact remains that Bartesque still has a lot to explain." "We must find Nancy immediately," George declared urgently. "Mr. Bartesque may slip away, and then we'll never learn the reason for his strange actions." End of chapter 22. Back for a minute while I eat some lunch. Okay, enjoy your lunch. This sounds like a typical work day for me. Let me tell you how your hotel is abusive because I can't have a loud party in my tiny hotel room. Yeah. Welcome for clapping. Yep. You can't have any fun forging documents at this hotel. It's just not allowed. I don't know how I feel about this music, but it's fine. Okay. What are you having for lunch? I shall continue on with chapter 23, which is called An Exoneration. Following Margaret Judson's plaintive declaration that she could not face her former fiancé, Morton Wardell, because of the charge of theft which stood against her, Nancy sought to draw from the young woman the story of her troubles. "You are innocent of the accusation?" she inquired gently. "Oh, yes, I've never misappropriated anything in my life." Miss Judson was embarrassed to have revealed so much, but finding Nancy kind and sympathetic, she tried to explain the difficulties of her situation. "It happened years ago," she related. "I'd been abroad and was returning on a French liner. En route home, I met a charming woman named Mrs. Brownell, and we became good friends. I finally invited her to spend a weekend at my home." "The house near the Deer Mountain Hotel?" Nancy interposed. "Yes, I was living there at the time. Mrs. Brownell accepted my invitation. One evening, learning that my guests loved beautiful jewelry, I opened the safe and showed her a box of family heirlooms. Instead of returning it to the vault as I should have done, I carelessly placed the container in my bureau drawer. Later that night, as I was preparing for bed, Mrs. Brownell came to my room to show me a jeweled vanity case. It was an exquisite piece, as lovely as anything I've ever seen. We chatted for a time, and then my visitor went back to her room, leaving the vanity case on my dresser." "You didn't attempt to return it to her?" Nancy inquired in surprise. "She had retired before I noticed that she had overlooked it. I meant to give it to her early in the morning. You probably can guess the rest of the tale." "Fire broke out during the night?" "Yes, it seemed to be everywhere at once. When I awoke, the bedroom was filled with smoke, and flames were shooting up the stairway. I ran to Mrs. Brownell's room, and after awaking her, aroused the servants. By then it was too late to save very much, and we were all forced to escape down a porch trellis." "Did you forget the box of jewelry?" Nancy questioned. "No, I wrapped it up in some of my clothing, snatched up Mrs. Brownell's vanity case and my pocketbook, and managed to escape just an instant before the floor of my room crashed. In terror, I ran toward old Joe Haley's cabin, intending to ask him to guard the jewelry. Somehow I became lost. Later, I remembered that I had stumbled across the ravine bridge, but about what happened after that, my memory isn't very clear. Apparently, I wandered through the woods until I fainted. In any event, hours elapsed before I recovered consciousness. I was chilled to the bone." "The experience must have been a frightful one," Nancy murmured sympathetically. "I can never forget it. Never. When I looked about, the bundle of clothing and my pocketbook were still beside me. The little casket of jewelry and Mrs. Brownell's vanity case were gone." "Did you notice footprints nearby?" Nancy interposed quickly. Miss Judson shook her head. "I was too excited to notice anything. I wandered about in a semi-dazed condition, hoping I'd find the jewelry. I felt certain I had dropped it somewhere in the woods." When dawn came, I knew that the search was useless. I staggered to Mr. Haley's cabin and told him I had lost the jewelry. I begged him to help me find it. He promised he would. The jewelry represented a great loss? Ned inquired, for he had never seen the contents of the carved brass chest. Yes, several of the pieces were priceless. Among the articles was my diamond engagement ring, which I valued above all else. And of course Mrs. Brownell's vanity case was worth a small fortune. According to her estimate? Nancy inquired with a smile. Yes, she claimed it was valued at $3,000, and she blamed me entirely for the loss. How could she do that when she had left the article on your bureau? Ned asked. She was lucky that it didn't burn. Perhaps you were unwise to let her know that you had saved the piece for her, Nancy added quietly. I never told her, Miss Judson confessed. Mrs. Brownell gave me no opportunity. She had followed me to Joe Haley's cabin and overheard me tell him that I had recovered the vanity case. She demanded that I return it immediately or pay her $3,000. That was gratitude for you, Ned commented. I'd have told her to go jump in the ravine. I had thought Mrs. Brownell to be a very charming person, Miss Judson continued, but I learned to my sorrow that I knew nothing of her true character. She threatened to turn me over to the police. I gladly would have paid the $3,000, but I could not afford to. Nearly everything I owned, except a few acres of land, had been destroyed in the fire. I don't believe that any court would have substantiated the woman's claim, Nancy said thoughtfully. Probably she was only trying to frighten you. You mean she couldn't have caused my arrest? I think not, Miss Judson. She would have claimed that I had hidden the jewel case deliberately. Even so, Mrs. Brownell could not win her case without proof. You should have consulted a lawyer. I realize that now, but at the time I was panic-stricken. I ran away, living for a long time in Chicago. That was the very worst thing you could have done, Ned assured her. Flight tended to confirm your guilt. I was so upset I acted impulsively. I kept hoping that Joe Haley would find the jewel chest, for I felt certain it was somewhere in the woods. So many years have elapsed now that, of course, the search is useless. Perhaps not, Nancy remarked quietly, but the young woman did not seem to hear her. Mrs. Brownell has never ceased to bother me since the vanity case was lost, Miss Judson went on. While she has never come to me herself, she sends a friend. A friend? Nancy inquired alertly. Another woman who follows me wherever I go. She keeps pressing me for money and threatening that unless I pay, she will expose me to my friends and to the police. I am at my wit's end, Miss Drew. I'd rather be dead than be subjected to this torment all my life. Miss Judson, I think your troubles are very nearly at an end, Nancy said kindly. Your jewel box has been found. Miss Judson sprang from the sofa, trembling with eagerness. Did Joe Haley tell you that? He found my casket? No, it came into my possession by accident, Nancy explained. Tell me, what was the little chest made of? Carved brass, and the design was very beautiful. I can't describe it, but I can give you some idea of it by drawing. Seizing a pencil, Miss Judson made a rough sketch which convinced Nancy beyond any doubt that the chest she had found in the ravine belonged to the young woman. Tell me, did it contain the missing vanity case? Margaret Judson asked anxiously. Yes, and the diamond ring you mentioned. I think everything is there as it was on the night of the fire. Oh, Miss Drew, how can I ever thank you? This means everything to me, for now I can go to old Joe Haley, and I'll not be afraid to face Morton. We'll drive to the cabin if you wish, Nancy offered. Mr. Haley will be very happy to see you again. As the car sped along the road toward the Deer Mountain locality, Nancy answered the young woman's many questions concerning the manner in which the carved chest had been found. Could I have dropped it on the bank of the stream when I crossed the bridge the night of the fire? She speculated. I have no recollection of anything I did. It's quite possible the chest slipped from the bundle of clothing you had put it in, Nancy agreed thoughtfully. I found it buried deep in the mud. Leaving the automobile parked by the roadside, the three walked along the trail to the cabin. From a distance, they could see lights glimmering through the trees. As they approached closer, they heard men's voices. Nancy assumed that her father was talking with Mr. Haley, and she felt elated to think that the patient was gaining steadily in strength. The sound of footsteps brought Carson Drew to the door. As he flung it open, Nancy glanced inquiringly at Miss Judson, for she saw that her father had a visitor. Directly behind him stood Morton Wardell. Goes into chapter 23. I'm going to find some different music for the end of the book. $3,000 is a ton of money in the 30s. Okay, be safe driving. Mr. Barbecue needs a Kit Kat to feel better. I've got chicken fries and Texas toast. I need some...
Listen up. The soap you shower with? You probably haven't even questioned what bar of soap you like.
Sorry, that was an ad. See if this is any good. It's really quiet. Best of Epic Music Mix. Oh, excuse me. Okay. We'll try it. It's supposed to be epic, but we'll see. It kind of sounds like the music in Captain America Civil... is it Civil War or is it Winter Soldier? It sounds like that, though. That's what it sounds like. Okay, yeah, that's pretty epic. I guess just tell me if it gets too loud. But I turned it down a little bit, so hopefully it's not too bad. Chapter 24 is called A Detective's Invitation. Miss Judson failed to see her former fiancé until after she had entered the lighted cabin. Then, as their eyes met in a startled glance, neither spoke for an instant. An awkward silence fell. Even Nancy could think of nothing to say or do in such a crisis. At last, Morton Wardell took a step toward the young woman, his hand outstretched. "Margaret," he murmured brokenly. "Morton," she responded, and with a little sob threw herself into his arms. "I've missed you so much, and our separation was all a mistake, a dreadful mistake." Mr. Drew, Nancy, and Ned felt that they had no right to witness the happy reunion. They slipped quietly into the adjoining bedroom, using the pretext that they wished to see Mr. Haley. "If we just allow them to talk everything over alone, I'm sure matters will adjust themselves quickly," Nancy whispered to her father. "This plan of yours to reunite the lovers is all very well," Carson Drew returned gravely, "but you seem to forget the charge against Miss Judson. I was assigned to work on the jewel theft case, and I can't allow my sympathy." Nancy laughingly pressed her fingers against her father's lips. "Don't say another word, Dad, until you've heard my story. Margaret Judson is absolutely innocent. She has explained everything to my complete satisfaction." "Perhaps not to mine," Mr. Drew rejoined with a trace of amusement. "By any chance, did Miss Judson identify the various members of the international jewel theft gang?" "Not intentionally, but she gave me a splendid clue. I'll tell you the entire story." With a word now and then from Ned, Nancy repeated all that she had learned from Miss Judson, and was gratified to observe that the information seemed to impress her father. In my opinion, Mrs. Brownell and her mysterious friend are the suspicious persons in the case, she ended by saying. They must be the criminal type, or they would not have attempted to extort money from Miss Judson. Carson Drew nodded. You may be right, Nancy, for the jeweled vanity case positively was identified by New York police as stolen property. There was no opportunity to say more just then, for the door opened to admit Miss Judson and Morton Wardell. Both were smiling, and they did not need to announce that the old engagement had been renewed. I'll never be able to repay you for your kindness, the young woman told Nancy, tears gleaming in her eyes. Ask any favor. I have just one, Miss Judson. I want you to talk with my father about Mrs. Brownell and her friend, and give him any information which you may have concerning either of them. It's so little to ask, I'll only be too glad to answer your questions. Mr. Haley, who had been sleeping soundly, stirred restlessly, and Nancy stepped forward to remove the screen which shielded his bed. Miss Judson took the old man's hand in her own, kneeling beside him as she did so. Is that you, Miss Margaret? He whispered. Yes, it is I, she answered softly. You must try to get well. You'll do it for my sake, won't you? Yes, the old man murmured, his eyes roving over her lovely face. I'm so glad you have come, but I failed you again. I tried, but I couldn't find the box. It doesn't matter now, Joe. The chest has been found. You are not to worry about it any more. With a sigh of relief, the old man closed his eyes, and within a few minutes had fallen again into a restful sleep. While Ned remained at the bedside, Mr. Drew and Nancy took Miss Judson into the kitchen, there to question her regarding Mrs. Brownell. I've no idea what became of the woman, Miss Judson reported, but her friend annoyed me a few days ago at Hemlock Hall. I think she's staying at one of the local hotels now. Could you get in touch with her by tomorrow? Mr. Drew asked. I suppose so, the other answered reluctantly. Deciding to take the young woman into his confidence, Carson Drew explained why he wished to locate Mrs. Brownell and her accomplice. Miss Judson promised that she would do everything in her power to cooperate with the law. If you are able to locate this person, tell her you have recovered the jewelry, Mr. Drew instructed. Ask her to meet you here at this cabin if she wishes to receive the lost vanity case. I'm almost afraid to see the woman alone, Miss Judson answered reluctantly. She has a violent temper. Perhaps I could go with you, Nancy suggested eagerly, adding in disappointment. Oh, I forgot about the golf tournament tomorrow. I believe I can arrange matters for you so that your match can be played in the afternoon, Mr. Drew smiled. The tournament chairman is a very reasonable man. A few minutes later, Miss Judson, her fiancé, Nancy, and Mr. Drew prepared to motor back to the Deer Mountain Hotel. As usual, you seem to be the one who must hold the fort, Nancy said to Ned as she told him goodbye. After this case is settled, we'll try to have some good times. I enjoyed myself tonight, Ned told her truthfully. I haven't had so much excitement in a year. At the hotel, Nancy found her worried chums. After she had sent Bud and Bill back to the cabin to keep Ned company, she helped settle Miss Judson in a room not far from her own. At the young woman's request, she lingered for a few minutes to talk. There's a question that I should like to ask you, Nancy ventured. Certainly. What is it? I don't wish to seem personal, but are you well acquainted with a man named Mortimer Bardescu? Why, no, Miss Judson replied promptly. I met him on my trip abroad, but I can't say that I liked him very well. Have you seen him since your return to this country? Oh, no, he was just a casual acquaintance. Mr. Bardescu has been staying at this hotel, Nancy explained. He pretended to know you well, but I half suspected he was only bluffing. I believe Mrs. Brownell knew the man, Miss Judson said thoughtfully. It was through her that I met him, and she often mentioned his name. Did you consider Mr. Bardescu to be an honest person? Sorry, too many different music going on. Why, yes, I've never heard that he was otherwise. Miss Judson's eyes were heavy. Suspecting that the young woman wished to retire, Nancy soon said goodnight and returned to the room of her chums. Bess and George eagerly awaited her, and almost before the door had closed, bombarded her with questions. In turn, they related their own adventure with Mortimer Bardescu. "Don't feel bad about your mistake, George," Nancy chuckled. "It served the man right. He thought he would play a grand joke on me by asking me to leave a message in the hand of the statue." "I still think he must be a crook," George insisted gloomily. "Otherwise, how do you explain all those different signatures?" "I suspect the man is a practical joker. I'll try to talk with him tomorrow and find out." In the morning, Nancy learned from the tournament chairman that her golf match had been postponed until 2 o'clock. That left her ample time to go with Miss Judson to Hemlock Hall, where she believed Mrs. Brownell's friend had engaged a room. "She calls herself Mrs. Martlet," the young woman explained as she and Nancy drove toward the hotel in Mr. Drew's car. "However, I think that's not her true name." Learning that the woman was still at Hemlock Hall, Miss Judson went to a house phone and requested Mrs. Martlet to meet her in the lobby. Nancy then stationed herself within hearing distance, but in such a position that she would not be noticed. Soon a young woman emerged from the elevator, walking directly toward Miss Judson. Nancy instantly recognized her as the same person who had worn a flowered dress upon the night she had visited Hemlock Hall with Mortimer Bardescu. The conversation between the two was brief, ending when Mrs. Martlet promised to come to the cabin in the woods directly after luncheon, bringing Mrs. Brownell with her. "Everything's moving smoothly according to Dad's plan," Nancy declared in delight when she and Margaret Judson were leaving the hotel together. "I only hope my golf match won't keep me from witnessing the grand finale." "If we have a few minutes, I'd like to stop at my house and pick up a few clothes," her companion said. "I really have nothing at the Deer Mountain Hotel, and I'd like to dress up a bit." "For Morton?" Nancy asked teasingly. "Yes," the young woman admitted, blushing. "I feel very gay, and I'd like to dress the part." "I don't blame you," Nancy responded, but she added soberly, "I hope everything turns out as well as we expect." Margaret Judson glanced at her in quick alarm. "Surely you don't think I'll not be cleared of the charges against me?" "Oh, I'm hoping things will adjust themselves," Nancy answered hastily, not wishing to alarm the young woman. "I don't see how anything can go wrong now." Nancy did not reply, but it occurred to her that if Mrs. Brownell should secure the slightest inkling that she was under suspicion, the woman would not keep the appointment at Mr. Haley's cabin. It was luncheon time when the pair reached the Deer Mountain Hotel. As soon as she had snatched a bite to eat, Nancy hastened to meet Miss Howard on the golf course. In crossing the lawn, she encountered Mortimer Bardescu, who had just finished his final match. From the expression on his face, she gathered that he had lost the men's championship. "How did you come out in your game?" she questioned carelessly. "I lost," the man snapped. "I'm blaming it on those two chums of yours, too." "What did they have to do with it?" "I was so upset by everything that happened last night, I couldn't get a grip on myself. My swing was badly off." "That's too bad," Nancy replied evenly. "Mistakes will happen." As she tried to walk on, Mortimer Bardescu attached himself to her, seemingly eager to talk. "Last night, I told your friends I'd explain everything to you, and to you only," he declared. "Yes?" Nancy inquired. "I've known from the first that you were Nancy Drew." "Why shouldn't have you known it? I made no mystery of my name." "I mean, I was aware that you are the famous Nancy Drew, known far and wide for your ability as a detective." "You exaggerate, I fear." "I made up my mind to match my wits with yours," Bardescu went on. "I guess I fooled you too, didn't I?" "For a few days," Nancy answered coldly, "but I suspected the truth long before you thought I did." "About my handwriting?" the man asked, looking crestfallen. "Yes, you changed your signature a bit too often. It was too obvious that you were intending to bewilder me." "I guess maybe I wasn't quite as smart as I thought then. But I did have you running around in circles for a time. Years ago, when I was in college, I discovered that I had a talent for imitating handwriting, and I've had a lot of fun doing it ever since." "I'd advise you to give up that pastime, or you may yet find yourself in trouble with the law," Nancy said severely. "The next time it may not be so easy to prove yourself innocent of charges of forgery against you." "Oh, I can take care of myself," The man chuckled. Well, young lady, run along since you seem to be in such a hurry. After you win your match, we'll have tea together and I'll buy you a 2BX Gardenia. Laughing heartily at his own joke, he walked on toward the hotel. We'll not have tea together, Nancy muttered furiously to herself. The conceit of that man! I've never met anyone like him in all my life, and I hope I may never see him again. Try as she would, the girl could not calm her ruffled feelings, and she was still angry as she met her opponent. With Miss Howard, she walked to the 15th tee, where play was to be resumed. A large gallery had followed the two players, and Nancy's chums had joined the crowd. It was generally conceded that Miss Howard should win the match, for in being 1 point ahead with only 4 holes left to play, she held a great advantage. Then, too, it was known that Nancy's hand had been injured, and few persons believed that she could play her best game with such a handicap. Miss Howard, who held the honor of driving first, sent a long, straight ball flying down the fairway. Undaunted, Nancy teed up her ball, and while the gallery stood a tiptoe, swung her club with all her strength. With only 4 holes to play, she had no intention of babying her injured hand. The ball had been struck squarely. To Nancy's satisfaction, it sailed past the trees and came to rest in the middle of the fairway some yards ahead of Miss Howard's ball. A murmur of admiration ran through the crowd. As Nancy was leaving the tee, Sammy followed her. On a sudden inspiration, she said to the lad, Sammy, have you ever caddied for Mr. Bartescue? Yes, Miss Drew. Why? While the girl was trying to decide how to find out from the boy whether the man had ever quizzed him about her interest in the haunted bridge, the caddy replied to her unspoken questions. Mr. Bartescue was always asking me about where I thought you went. I never told him about the scarecrow, the boy laughed. What did you tell him? Nancy prodded. Nothing, except that you seemed interested in Miss Margaret Judson, who used to live near here. At this moment, the conversation was interrupted, but Nancy had learned the answer to one question which had puzzled her. A page boy from the hotel handed the girl a sealed letter. A message for you, Miss Drew, he announced. Nancy accepted the envelope, but for a moment was afraid to open it. If it should prove to be a communication from Mortimer Bartescue, the man she detested, she feared her game might be ruined. She felt tempted to wait until the match was over before reading it. However, if she should do that, she probably would worry all the while about the contents. Would it not be better to learn the bad news at once? I may as well read it, she decided, and promptly tore open the envelope. A broad smile played over the girl's face, for the message which she read was this. Good luck, Nancy. Mrs. Brownell received our message, and the stage is set for her arrival. The note was signed, Father. End of chapter 24. This is some intense golf music. And hi, Timo. Thank you for the host and welcome for joining. We're just finishing up. This is going to be the last chapter of this book. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm stretching. I hope you're doing well today. Yeah, this is pretty intense music here. So I guess we should go ahead and finish it off. Chapter 25 is called Farewell to the Ghost. The message puzzled Nancy for a moment. Then she smiled. Her father wanted to assure her that everything was in readiness to receive Mrs. Brownell when she would visit the cabin in the woods. The girl knew that Mr. Drew would leave no stone unturned in planning the capture of the woman who to all appearances was a member of the International Jewel Thief Gang. Good old Dad, he'll not overlook anything, she thought. Probably by this time he's had Mrs. Brownell's telephone wires tapped and her every action will be watched. When she claims the vanity case is hers, the evidence will be complete. Carson Drew had dispatched a telegram to New York detectives asking that they forward the stolen vanity case by airplane. Very likely he was at the airport now, awaiting the package. Everything's moving according to our plan, so there's nothing for me to worry about except this golf match, Nancy reflected as she studied her next shot. I'm going to buckle down and win. She addressed the ball, and while the gallery watched in admiration, played a beautiful shot which her opponent could not equal. Nancy won the hole, squaring the match. Miss Howard, grimly determined not to lose the championship, wasted no shots on the 16th, with the result that the hole was halved. With only 2 remaining to be played, the score still stood even. As Nancy prepared to make her first shot from the 17th tee, Sammy sidled toward her. Miss Drew, he said timidly, taking a ball from his pocket. I don't know whether or not this is the right time to tell you, but see what I found? My autographed ball! Nancy cried in delight. Where did you find it? Not far from the haunted bridge. It was hidden under some dry leaves, he replied. Why don't you finish out the round with the autographed ball? Sammy suggested. It may bring you luck. I'd like to, Nancy declared, and turning to her opponent, she requested permission to change balls. I have no objection, Miss Howard assured her. Nancy was smiling as she teed up the Jimmy Harlow ball. She felt that she could not be defeated now. Hadn't the ball led her straight to an absorbing mystery? Now she confidently believed that it would bring her the silver loving cup. So great was Nancy's elation that the pain in her hand troubled her scarcely at all. She became oblivious of the crowd and heard no comments which were made, nor was she aware that her beautiful shots were forcing Miss Howard to press, and thus make serious errors. As she putted at the 17th green, she did not even hear Sammy murmur excitedly, You're one up, Miss Drew. Take this hole and the championship is yours. Nancy played home in true championship style, every shot straight and true. Miss Howard, in a desperate attempt to win, tried too hard and sent her ball into a sand trap. This cost her an extra point. Nancy's ball already rested on the green, scarcely 3 yards from the cup. She putted with ease and confidence. The ball rolled so swiftly that a little gasp of horror went up from the crowd. Many persons thought it would end at the far side of the green, but the ball had been struck squarely and the aim was perfect. It dropped with a little thump into the hole. Miss Howard stood perfectly still for a moment. Then she putted her own ball, missed, and tried again. This time the ball dropped, but already the match was lost. She reached out and grasped Nancy's hand. Congratulations, Miss Drew. You played a beautiful game and you deserve to win the silver cup. The crowd cheered, and friends rushed forward to praise Nancy. At last she was led in triumph to the hotel, there to receive the handsome trophy for the women's championship. We knew you'd win, Bess cried gaily. Oh, Nancy, you were marvelous. Your score totaled 87, George added proudly. It sets a new record for women here at the Deer Mountain course, and you were the youngest one in the tournament, too. Will you do me a favor? Nancy asked quickly. George and Bess both nodded. We'll even clean your golf shoes for you. Oh, sorry. We'll even clean your golf shoes for you. George chuckled. It's an honor to perform any task for a champion. Never mind the kidding, Nancy rejoined, smiling. I wish you'd take this cup and toss it in my room. I have a most important engagement. At the cabin? George inquired as she relieved her chum of the trophy. Yes, I may be too late now, but I'd like to get there before Mrs. Brownell arrives, if I can make it. As Nancy hastened toward the woods, she could not help but reflect that it was a pity persons of Mrs. Brownell's type choose to live by dishonest means. She caught herself wondering about the child's picture which she had seen in the jeweled vanity case. The woman had brought disgrace upon herself, but it would not be right to drag an innocent child into the affair. Nancy approached Nancy approached the cabin quietly. Hearing no voices within, she opened the door. Carson Drew sprang to his feet, then laughed in relief as he saw that it was his daughter. I thought for a moment Mrs. Brownell had caught me napping. Then I am in time. She hasn't been here yet? No, but she ought to be arriving soon, if at all. The federal agents, where are they, Dad? Stationed along all the roads from her hotel. Should Mrs. Brownell decide not to come here or attempt to escape from us after being accused of the theft, she'll find every avenue cut off. You are convinced of her guilt, Dad? Yes, her telephone wires were tapped and we have a record which would convict her in any court. However, we wish Miss Judson to make a positive identification. She may never keep the appointment. I think her desire to obtain the vanity case will bring her here, Carson Drew replied confidently. Margaret Judson was in the adjoining room with Mr. Haley, but at the lawyer's suggestion, she came to sit by the window while the others secreted themselves in a closet. 15 minutes elapsed, and both Nancy and her father were growing weary of their confinement. Suddenly they heard Miss Judson say in an excited undertone, "Mrs. Brownell is coming now, and the other woman is with her." "Keep perfectly calm," Carson Drew instructed crisply. "Carry out your orders to the letter." The cabin door opened to admit the two women. They glanced quickly about, and apparently satisfied that no trap had been laid for them, addressed Miss Judson. "I am in a great hurry," Mrs. Brownell said. "My friend tells me that you have recovered the vanity case. Give it to me at once." "I have it here," Margaret Judson replied, "but I must be certain that it actually belongs to you." "Let me see it." The case was offered for inspection. "Yes, it's mine." "You are quite certain?" "Of course I am," Mrs. Brownell retorted impatiently. "See, I'll show you." She opened the lid, displaying the picture which had attracted Nancy's interest. "This is a photo of my little girl, only it's been ruined." Carson Drew and Nancy emerged from the closet and confronted the two startled women. "Your identification is very interesting, Mrs. Brownell," the lawyer said evenly, "for it happens that the vanity case is stolen property." "What do you mean?" the woman gasped, backing a step away. "How could it be stolen?" "The jeweled case was given to you by a member of a notorious smuggling gang," the lawyer said quietly. "Undoubtedly as a reward for your past services in getting rid of stolen jewelry for them. But you know all this. It will suffice to say that our evidence against you is perfect." Mrs. Brownell stared hard at Mr. Drew and knew that his words were no idle bluff. She suddenly darted to the door, but the lawyer, prepared for just such a move, caught her firmly by the wrists. Simultaneously, a federal agent appeared in the doorway, making it impossible for the Martlet woman to flee. "You may as well tell the truth," Mr. Drew urged Mrs. Brownell as he forced her into a chair. "If you turn state's evidence, your own prison term will be the lighter for it." "It's true. The vanity case is stolen property," the accused woman admitted after a long hesitation. "I didn't mean to steal, nor to have dealings with thieves, but I met a very pleasant-mannered man who induced me to do a little work for him. At first I thought it was honest work, and I accepted this jeweled vanity case in payment. Later on I was paid with other rich presents until by the time I suspected the truth, there was no retreating. I could only keep on with the gang. Many a time I've tried to break away, but it's been impossible. You will tell me the names of these persons with whom you've been dealing?" Mrs. Brownell's eyes roved accusingly toward her companion, but Mrs. Martlet faced the group with flashing eyes. "You can't drag me into this. I've had nothing to do with the affair. My only mistake was to be friendly with you." "Never mind the heroics," Carson Drew said with a smile. "Your telephone wires were tapped last night, and our case against you is quite damaging, even without Mrs. Brownell's testimony." "I will tell everything," Mrs. Brownell promised, "but only upon one condition." "What is that?" the lawyer asked. "My little daughter must not be dragged into this sordid mess. She's attending school in Paris and has no suspicion that her mother is anything but an honorable person. I beg of you, don't let her know what becomes of me." "I'll do my best to keep the knowledge of your arrest from her," Mr. Drew promised, soberly. "And as I said, your term should be a very light one, providing you turn state's evidence." "I will gladly make a full confession," Mrs. Brownell agreed. "Bring me paper and pen and ink." One of the federal agents who had been trained in shorthand offered to take down the woman's words while Carson Drew questioned her. Mrs. Brownell named all the members of the international smuggling ring, and when her evidence was complete, signed the paper. "One more question," said Mr. Drew. "Did you burn down the Judson mansion?" No, I had nothing to do with that. The fire was an accident." "But you did enter the house with the intention of stealing the family jewels?" "Yes, I deliberately brought up the subject with Miss Judson, inducing her to open the safe." "Were you successful in stealing any of the pieces?" "I took a valuable necklace, a brooch, and a diamond-studded watch. The other jewels Miss Judson carried with her to her bedroom." "What became of the stolen articles?" "I pawned them for what they would bring." "Have you the tickets still?" Miss Judson asked eagerly. "Yes, I kept them, for the jewels were worth far more than I received from the pawnbroker." Margaret Judson was overjoyed to learn that she would be able to retrieve a portion of her missing property, and after federal agents had taken away the 2 prisoners, she tried to thank Nancy and Mr. Drew for their kindness. Tears came to her eyes. "In helping you, we helped ourselves," the lawyer replied. "Mrs. Brownell's confession definitely closes the case." "I think we're all rather surprised that Mortimer Bardescu had nothing to do with the jewel smuggling," Nancy commented with a smile. "There isn't a particle of evidence against them, is there, Dad?" "Nope, he's just a cheap boaster." Soon after the departure of the federal agents, Morton Wardell, Bess, George, and the 3 boys appeared at the cabin. They had remained away only because they feared that their presence would hamper the work of the detectives. There was general rejoicing because of Miss Judson's complete vindication, and Nancy was given full credit for solving the jewel theft case. "One angle of the mystery still baffles me," the girl declared as they all sat grouped about old Joel Haley's bed. "I thought everything had been explained satisfactorily," her father replied in surprise. "I'm thinking of my own special mystery, the haunted bridge," Nancy laughed. "I keep wondering who set up the scarecrow." Mr. Haley, who had enjoyed listening to an account of the day's happenings, began to chuckle. "I can tell you who set up the scarecrow," he announced. "I did it myself. Inquisitive boys from the golf course kept coming here and causing trouble. They bothered my animals and tramped on my flowers. I thought the scarecrow might help to keep them away." "It certainly did," Nancy laughed. All of the caddies decided that the bridge surely was haunted. "The scarecrow served a useful purpose," the old man nodded. "It kept dogs away too, for they would attack the figure, barking so loudly that I'd always hear them, and drive them off before they could damage my choice plants. When Bud and Bill repaired the bridge, they set the scarecrow back in his usual place," Ned assured the old man. "He'll serve as a guardian of your property for many years." "There's still one thing that hasn't been explained," Bess declared. "What caused the fearful groaning noise which we heard so often?" "I know the answer," Nancy smiled. "Wait until we walk back over the haunted bridge on our way back to the hotel, and you shall have it too." Margaret Judson planned to remain with Mr. Haley, caring for him until he should be able to retire. Oh my gosh, I can't read. Margaret Judson planned to remain with Mr. Haley, caring for him until he should be able to resume his usual duties, so Ned, Bud, and Bill were no longer required to remain at the cabin. They would be free to enjoy several days of fun before returning to River Heights with Nancy and her father. As the young people prepared to leave the shack, Miss Judson drew the girls aside to tell them that she and Mr. Wardell planned to be married within a few weeks. "We expect to rebuild the old mansion," she revealed. "Joe Haley has promised to take care of the property for us, so we hope to reestablish everything as it was before the fire." The young people presently bade their friends farewell, and in returning to the hotel, selected their favorite route, the one which led along the ravine to the haunted bridge. Nancy drew Bess's attention to 2 tall trees. "There is the explanation for the groaning sound heard so often in this vicinity." "I don't see," Bess began, then trailed off into silence. The wind was rocking the treetops, and as 2 thick boughs rubbed together, a strange squeaking sound was heard by those who stood below. "When the wind is stronger, the noise takes on the character of a groan," Nancy explained. "Sometimes the tree seems to sigh, and then again almost to shriek." Again Bess smiled in admiration of her chum's cleverness. No matter how many mysteries Nancy solved, the Marvin girl never ceased to be amazed at each new one. She was to stand aghast at the solution of the next problem, the clue of the tapping heels. Single file, the young people trooped over the bridge, feeling a trifle blue to think that their fine adventure had ended. But their spirits lifted, and there was general laughter when Nancy, who came last, paused to shake the limp arm of the flapping scarecrow. "Goodbye, old Mr. Ghost," she addressed him gaily. "A million thanks for a very pleasant mystery." And that's the end of the book. Ow. Okay. That's enough of the, you know, the thing. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Joni. Happy to finish off the book. I'll have it up on YouTube in the next few days here. Get the other ones up as well, because I think part 4 is missing, so I gotta do that, but I'll do that after I end the stream. So thank you all for being here. I'll just let you know on Discord if I plan on doing any more streams this week. If not, I may do 1 or 2 next week, but after that it's kind of I don't know what I'm gonna do, because I'm starting grad school, so I don't know what my stream situation will be like. But I will probably try to stream whenever I can. So, thank you all for being here. Hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I'll see you all later. Bye!